Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for taking time to join us here today. My name is Jamal Wilson, and I work here in the FAA Surveillance and Broadcast Services Group. And I'm here with some of my ADSB team members to talk with you about a very important topic, and that is to make sure you know how to check and see if your ADSB equipment is working properly. As I said, I'm here with my team, and I'd like for them to take a minute to come on and introduce themselves before we dive in.
Hi, my name is Ty Prettyman, and I support the Aircraft Maintenance Division of the FAA's Flight Standards Organization.
A little delay in my turning on the video, sorry. So I'm Jim Wright. I am an engineer, and I work for the FAA Surveillance and Broadcast Services, which is the ADSB program.
And good afternoon. I'm Jim Kenny. I'm an aviation safety inspector with the Flight Operations Group in FAA's Flight Standard Service.
Excellent. Thank you so much, gentlemen. If any of you that are attending today have ever stopped by the ADSB outreach booth during any one of our events such as Sun and Fun or Oshkosh, AOPA Flying, you might recognize some, if not all, the faces in this group. And as I said before, we want to talk about the public ADSB performance report, or how to check to make sure that your performance is working properly. You know, we have the FAA's preeminent experts here with us on ADSB performance, so I want to turn it over to them to delve deeper into the topic. Ty and Jimmy, over to you.
Thanks so much, Jamal. I appreciate that. So today we're going to walk you through the steps to check that your ADSB equipment is working properly. We'll highlight some of the common issues that pilots face, and also we'll answer your questions at the end of the session.
All right, thanks, Ty. So let's talk about why this is important to pilots. I suspect we have audience members who've been equipped with ADSB for many years and others that have just equipped more recently. So can we start with the basics?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll do that. Yes, the FAA recommends that all aircraft owners and operators check the performance of newly installed ADSB equipment. Also, for those of you who have been equipped for quite some time, we also recommend periodic checks as well, since we have detected some changes in avionics performance over time.
Okay, great. So we're often asked by pilots if they could simply ask ATC if their ADSB is performing properly. There are a couple of problems with this one. It congests the frequency and could distract busy controllers from their duties. But more importantly, that while the controllers have position information that they're using from your ADSB, you don't have access to any of the performance data that you can get in this performance report that we're going to talk to you about today. Back to you, Ty.
So let's get started. First, the easiest way to access the paper report is go to Google and type in ADSB performance report. You can also access the report from our Equip ADSB webpage, and that is www.faa.gov/Equip ADSB, where we also have a quick link, and that is faa.gov/go/ADSB paper, PAPR. So let's go through how to fill out the form. This is the first page of the website when you get into it, and it describes some basic information you're going to need in order to fill out the form. So we can go to the next page now. The first thing the website's going to ask you for is the flight date. And this is in UTC time, and that's important, especially for those of you on the West Coast of the US, because if you fly later in the day on the West Coast, your UTC time will in fact be the next day. So keep that in mind. So you will put the date in that box there, again, UTC time, and we can go to the next slide. Now we've given you an option to pick a particular flight if you have flown several flights in one day. And the way to do that is to click the check mark in that box which says optional time. And in the box below that, enter the time during the flight of the flight you're interested in getting a report for. Once you've done that, the system will send you a report for that flight. Okay, next slide. And clearly we need to know about your aircraft. So this gives you an opportunity to either put in your tail number, which most people will use, of course, or the ICAO address in hex or octal, if that's what you have. Okay, next slide. Now, we need to send you the report, of course. So we need your name and we need an email address where we can send that report. Next slide. Now, here's where you need to know a little bit about your equipment. There are two links. There's what's called a 1090 and a UAT. In this box, you will select which link you have. Next slide. And then in this area here, we're asking you to input what equipment you have, both the manufacturer and the model. In here as an example, we simply have Garmin and a GTX model listed. But in those pull-down menus with the arrow there, it will give you all of the available options that are FAA approved. And then note, sorry, can you go back one slide? Note just below this box, there is an email address. And if you have any issues filling out this form, or you don't see your equipment here, or any questions whatsoever, you can certainly click on that link, and that link will take you to an email, and you can send an email to that address. Okay, thanks. Go ahead to the next slide. Now, here's where we're asking for your GPS information. Now, a lot of units will have GPS and ADSB combined into one box. Some of them will be separate. So for this, we're asking you to submit that information, and it could be the same as your GPS, or it could be the same as your ADSB, or it could be different. And that gives you the option to enter that data here. Okay, next slide, please. Now, we're also asking, because we track this data, where you had your equipment installed. And we have a complete list of repair shops and locations here in the website. So you would simply use the pull-down menus to select your repair shop. The next box is an optional box to use for notes. And this is principally used if, for example, you have equipment on your aircraft, ADSB equipment, and is not shown in our system. What we ask is you select equipment that's as close as possible to yours and go ahead and enter your actual ADSB equipment in this box here. After you've done that, you simply click I'm not a robot and then submit request. And that will submit the request to the system. And at that point, it will take probably 20 to 30 minutes for you to receive your report by email.
All right, that was great, Ty. Thank you very much. So let's take a look at a couple of reports and discuss how to interpret any issues that might be reported on the report.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, that's the next step here. So first, let's take a look at what we call a clean report. And this is the first page of the paper report. This is what you will receive by email after you've submitted a successful request for a report. And this first page is simply a summary of some of the data that we receive. It tells us airborne versus surface, and it has some details there about the particular aircraft. We've intentionally blurred those out for privacy for this particular example, but of course your report will show all of that information in detail. And I wanted to make a special note at the bottom here that there's a little circle there, user's guide link. And that's a very important link because we have put together a very extensive user's guide that will walk you through every step of how to read this report. And it will also describe in detail some of the parameters that you're going to see on the next couple of pages, what they mean and how to interpret the report. So let's go to the next page. This is, again, a bit more summary information. This is more of a summary of the actual operation rather than the aircraft. And again, we've blurred out some personal information there. So next page, please. Summary of the actual ADSB transmission. This box actually is a summary of how the GPS portion of the ADSB is performing. So we can go to the next page, I'm sorry. Now, this is where all of the parameters that we measure show up, and the various percentage of whether this is a system that's broadcasting properly or not. Now, again, this is a clean report, so you're not going to see any red highlights here. But I do want to explain a little bit about what each of these sections mean. So missing elements is the first section up there. And this contains parameters which tell you that whether your ADSB system failed to transmit any of the required parameters. So that's missing elements. And I want to mention one issue we see somewhat frequently related to missing elements. If your transponder is set to on rather than alt, this will result in both baro and geo altitude to be missing in this table here, be missing from your ADSB transmissions. To avoid this problem, always fly with your transponder set to alt. The next section is called integrity and accuracy. And this section contains parameters that measure the accuracy of the GPS part of your ADSB system. Kinematics is next, and this section checks the aircraft position and speed for accuracy. Other checks is next, and that contains a lot of other various additional checks that the system does. And I want to make a special note about a couple of them here. Emitter category. Mode 3A in particular. If your paper report indicates that mode 3A has failed for a percentage or all of the flight, this means typically that your UAT was unable to pick up the mode 3A or 4096 code that your transponder was squawking. Your avionics shop will need to troubleshoot this and correct the problem for you. And one more issue we see somewhat frequently related to the other checks is called flight ID mismatch. If this field is red, you may have a call sign mismatch. Jim Kenny is our call sign mismatch expert, and he is here today. And he will be providing a separate call sign mismatch virtual seminar on Thursday, 8/5 at this same time. Be sure you tune in. Next, let's go to the next page. That is a clean report. So let's now look at a report with what we call flags. This is a report which will have some red boxes highlighted. The front page is going to look identical. We can go to the next page. This page will look identical as well. Next page. And now we're beginning to see some of the red flags I was mentioning. This happens to be in the area of the GPS. And if we go to the next page, we're going to see a lot more red. And what this is this is an indication that you need to send this report or contact the avionics shop that installed your equipment and work through getting these issues resolved. Okay, let's go to the next page. Now, there's one more thing we want to highlight here, and that is if your report has this red designator at the top here saying that the aircraft is on the no services list, we ask you then to contact the email address that's to the left of the report on your screen now. This is an issue that comes up occasionally, and we're going to talk about that more shortly.
Thank you for that time, Jimmy. I mean, you've presented a lot of excellent information here and walking people through not only how to submit for a report, but interpret what it means. And that'll go a long way to helping folks maintain their equipment. One thing I want to touch on here briefly is that you mentioned the NSAL, and for us working inside the agency, we're familiar with the term and what it means. But would you mind taking just a second to kind of walk our viewers through what that is and a little bit behind that?
Sure, of course, I'd be happy to do that. The NSAL stands for No Services Aircraft List, and these are aircraft which are put on a particular list when we're detecting issues with their ADSB. And the ADSB system has the ability to filter ADSB data by ICAO address using the No Services Aircraft List. This filter helps keep potentially false or misleading ADSB data from reaching the air traffic controller's display. Once on the nozzle, the aircraft will no longer receive traffic from FAA radar through the Adsb uplink, and the aircraft's ADS-B information will not be displayed on a controller's screen. You can send an email to that address to the left there for additional information and or for guidance on corrective actions and coordination for removal of aircraft from this ICAO address filter, the NASL.
So, Ty, it may also be interesting for the audience to understand what this really means. For example, if the aircraft is on the No Services Aircraft list, it will not be visible to ATC via the ADS-B link. Your existing transponder, provided it's functional, will still be visible to ATC via the radar system. Okay, in mountainous terrain, this in many cases means that that ATC will only see you at a higher altitude. And this depends on the location of the radar and also the ADS-B antennas that are out in the system.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Jim. That's useful information that a lot of folks might not know regarding system operation. I appreciate that. What we'd like to do now, gentlemen, is kind of open this up to the chat portion of today's webinar, where we answer questions that come in from folks on the paper report. And what we ask folks to do that are watching this today is just send us your questions, and we will do our very best to answer as many of those as we possibly can in the time that we have left allotted here in the webinar. So I'm going to dig into the chat function and see what's coming in. It looks like there are questions starting to roll in here. This first question has to do with airspace. Ty, I'm going to give this to you. And the question is, do I have to be flying in ADS-B required airspace to get a paper report?
No, that's an important one. And no, in fact, you don't. As long as you're flying in US airspace, the system will capture you and create a record, and we can send you a report. So no, you don't have to be exclusively in rule airspace to get a report.
Thank you for that, Ty. I know, speaking personally, I've been in some, I wouldn't call it austere locations, but outside of populous areas, and you submit for a report and you get the same information as you would if you're flying in a Mode C or a Mode C Vail or Class Charlie airspace. The system works remarkably well. So I appreciate you educating us on that. More questions coming in here. This is software related. So Jimmy, I'm gonna let you take a stab at this one. I'm leaning in, bear with me, make sure I read this right. What about software updates? Will the paper report tell me if my software needs to be updated? Jimmy, you want to take a second?
Sure. Yeah, love to take that. So as you saw in the reports that Ty was just showing you, there's no information about which software version your ADS-B unit is using or whether that's current or not. So we don't have any access to that data. So the way to find this out is to check with your avionics shop or your equipment manufacturer. And we suggest you do this every year just to make sure you're running the current version of software for your avionics.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Jimmy. Let's see here. Ty, I'm going to give this question to you since it's another paper report request-centric question. And the question reads, what if I'm unable to request a paper report on the web? Is there another way I can check my ADS-B performance?
There's actually no other way to do it. But if you find that after submitting your report request that you get an email back saying I couldn't find a report, in that email will be an email address that you can send to get more information. And use that email address and simply include the aircraft N number, your ADS-B manufacturer and model number, and position source manufacturer model number, in addition to the day you flew. And we will manually go into the system and send a report to you. That usually will happen within 24 hours.
Excellent. Thank you, Ty. Jimmy, it looks like I got another question I want to pass your way. And the question has to do with deviations from Adsb requirements. And the question itself reads, can I get a one-time deviation from the requirement? And when I read requirement, I'm assuming it's the ADSB, the rule requirement is written in 91225 and 91227. You want to take a few minutes and kind of walk us through the deviation process, please?
Sure. So if you're, occasionally need to fly in airspace where ADSB is mandated, and you're not equipped with ADSB, or your ADSB is not functioning properly, we have created a website, and the program's called ADAPT. And the way I always find the website is I do a search for FAA space ADAPT, ADAPT. So on that site, there's a full description of the program and how it works. And also on the site, you can apply for occasional deviations from the requirement for ADSB to fly in, ADSB airspace without your ADSB. The requirements do need a functioning Mode C or Mode S transponder that transmits altitude. You must make the request at least an hour prior to your proposed departure time, and not more than 24 hours ahead of time. Maybe I'll kick that back to you, Jamal. Do you have anything else to add? I know you work the program very closely.
Absolutely, Jimmy. And yeah, there are a couple of additional pieces of information I would like to relay as it relates to in-flight authorizations. I know some folks often wonder if they're in the air and they have to deviate, and they want to know if they make a radio call, if that suffices as a deviation. Unfortunately, it does not. I mean, the FAA will not issue an in-flight authorization to operators of non-equipped aircraft. And ATC facilities also won't accept requests over the phone. So to alleviate the burdens from individual facilities, a tool was created to kind of centralize that functionality so that these facilities can do what they do best, and that's control traffic. And as such, we try and streamline that process and make sure that it all goes to the ADAPT tool, as Jimmy just pointed out before. So any clearance to operate in airspace where ADSB is not required, with compliant ADSB, you're going to go through the ADAPT website to do that. So thank you for that, Jimmy. It's important information.
You went on mute. Yeah. There you go. You were on mute for just a minute, Jamal.
Yeah, I think I got it reversed. I'm clicking the button thinking that I'm talking. So it looks like we got another question here as it relates to information. And the question is, where can I go for more information? Now, luckily, FAA has a plethora of websites that are filled with information from across the aviation gamut. But for information specific to the topic that we're discussing today, you can go to www.faa.gov/go/equip ADSB. And everything that we're talking about here, there's additional information on that, whether we're talking about ADSB deviation authorizations via ADAPT, a link to file for a paper report, and a lot of other interesting information in terms of airspace, equipment compatibility. It's a wealth of information on that site. I would recommend anybody to go to it if they want to learn a little bit more about ADSB and the performance reporting requirements. Excellent website to go to. With that said, I'm going to dig back into the chat feature and see what other questions we have coming in. Jimmy, I'm going to pass this one to you because this one looks like it's related to periodicity for paper reports. And the question itself reads, how often can I request a paper report? Jimmy, you want to take that?
Yeah, I'd love to. So you can get a paper report for every single flight if you want. They're free. They only take a couple of minutes to make the request, and they're emailed back to you within a few minutes. So request as many as you'd like, but we do ask that you check at least once a year to make sure your equipment's performing properly.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jimmy. I know personally, I like to at least once a quarter request one just to make sure that I have that peace of mind that my equipment is doing what it's supposed to do. And you can also use it for a number of different reasons also. As I said before, if I'm flying in a location where my equipment says that I'm pinging off of a minimal number of ADSB towers, I'll sometimes reference back to the paper report just to make sure that my equipment continue to do what it's supposed to do. And like I said, it's just a peace of mind type of thing to make sure that throughout the entirety of my aircraft's operational profile, I can go in there and request this free report and have peace of mind that my equipment is doing what it's supposed to do no matter where I choose to fly. It really is it's an excellent tool, And like Jimmy said, it's free. You pay nothing for it, and you can use it as much as you want. We encourage folks to use it more than just once a year, and use the information to make sure your equipment is working right. So it looks like we have another question coming in here, and it has to do with information on the actual request for a paper as it relates to the equipment and installation. So I'm going to start with Ty and then go to Jimmy. The question itself reads, why does the paper form need the equipment and installation information? Ty, you want to take a couple of minutes to dig into that, and then I'll pass it over to Jimmy if he wants to add anything.
Absolutely. That is a good question. It may seem a little odd why we ask for that. And we ask for that for the following reason. In my group, our job is to try to work with aircraft owners to reduce the issues they're having with their ADS-B system, reduce the number of aircraft flying in the United States that have non-operative ADS-B systems. And one of the ways we do that is we collect information on the type of equipment that's installed and also the actual install shop. Therefore, we can look at these statistics and see trends. So if we see a certain trend with a particular manufacturer where we're getting the same error over and over again, we can quickly nip that in the bud by contacting that manufacturer. And the same goes with install shops. If we see a trend with a particular install shop where a setting is incorrect or something else may be amiss, we can quickly nip that in the bud by contacting that install shop rather than bothering all of the individual owners. And that eliminates that issue very efficiently. So that's why principally we ask for that information.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Ty. Jimmy, did you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, he covered that very thoroughly. That's exactly what we're doing. We're working with a lot of people. There's, a few thousand aircraft out there that aren't functioning properly. So we're very busy, and it's good to find any trends with any manufacturers. And we work very closely with the manufacturers and the repair stations. It helps us, as Ty said, nip any problems that might be developing in the bud.
Right, very good point. We appreciate that, gentlemen. Anytime you can use information to kind of streamline the troubleshooting schematic and make sure you go to the right place and do it quickly to rectify the issues, that's a good thing. So excellent answer. I appreciate it. Jimmy, I have another question for you that came in, and it's related to paper submission. And the question itself reads, I requested a paper report for a flight and received a response that report could not be generated. Why is this?
All right. I've seen that quite a bit. Many people have contacted me with that problem, and 9 times out of 10, it's been that the pilot flew in the afternoon, say after 5 p.m. on the West Coast or after 8 p.m. on the East Coast. The UTC time is actually tomorrow. So if you ever get that message that we could not generate a report for you, the first thing I do is try the next day's date. Because with my experience of talking to a lot of people, that is the problem most of the time. And if not that, then I would contact, the email address that Ty was telling you about earlier for assistance. But the date would normally solve your problem. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. It just behooves us as operators to make sure we're taking in and processing the information appropriately. I know for myself as an East Coast flyer, if I want to do a sunset hop during the summer where the days are longer, and I go up, 8:30, 9 o'clock at night just to spin around for a few minutes and watch the sun go down. That's the next day on the UTC cycle because we're +4, right? So if I go up 9 o'clock or 8:45, my flight's going to drift into the next UTC day. So I have to be cognizant of that. And if I request the information, I have to keep in mind that I went into the next day and factor that into my performance request. So it's very good information, especially as operators are operating in all the different time zones in the NAS. If you're on the West Coast, your timeline for the next UTC day is much more narrow than mine is as an East Coast flyer. So excellent information. Let me see here. We have another question, and Ty, I'm going to give this to you because it's an international question. And the question reads, can Canadian registered aircraft obtain a report?
Yeah, good question. Absolutely. But two things have to happen. First of all, in order to request a report, you need to use the ICAO designation for that aircraft. Obviously, you don't have an N number, so use your ICAO designation. And second, you will have to have flown close enough to the Canadian-US border for our ADSB ground stations to pick you up. So as long as those two things are in place, we absolutely can generate a report and send it to you. If you've flown 1,000 miles north of our border, we're not going to pick you up. You've got to be within a certain distance. And of course, that distance varies with altitude. And if you submit a request and you don't feel like you're getting a report when you should, again, the email address that is submitted, that is sent back to you with that report, or the email sent back to you that announces they couldn't generate a report, just respond to the email address that's in there, and we will look into your case more thoroughly and just see if you are out of coverage.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Ty. It looks like we're getting pretty close to wrapping up this particular session, but before we go, I want to check and see if anybody here among our experts has one piece of advice as it relates to ADSB reporting that if you were in an elevator and you wanted to leave somebody with the most important piece of information regarding this topic, what would it be? And don't feel like you have to answer, but in our outreach travels, I think we've all received a question and you really want to convey that to as many people as possible. For me, it would be use the resource. As Jimmy pointed out before, it's free. You can do it as much as you want. And it's always better to get ahead of a problem if there is one than to be behind it, right? Just like as an operator, you don't want to be behind the aircraft. You definitely want to stay ahead of all the aspects, performance aspects of the aircraft. I'll start with Jim Kenny, and then I'll go Jim, Jimmy Wright, and Ty.
Yeah, thanks, Jamal. I would say that after the ADSB has been installed in your aircraft, get a paper report after that first flight to make sure or validate that everything is working perfectly. Because we have seen many examples where during the installation process, something didn't go right, or maybe a field was not filled in correctly, and that caused problems. People assume that it's a new radio transceiver, and they assume that it's working correctly. The only way to really know that it's working correctly is to validate it with the paper report. So when you put in a new ADSB transceiver, check it out, validate that it's working correctly, and then you should be good going forward.
Thanks for that, Jim. Jim, Jimmy Wright?
Yeah, so, excuse me, and I would add to that, do that as soon as you can. I mean, if you can, before you leave the town where you got your equipment installed, if you can do a flight, it need to be very long, just around the pattern will work. A little longer is better, but if there's any way to pull that report before you fly back home, so if there's any red in it, you can get that taken care of before you leave the shop. That would be the best thing to do. But if you do see any red, make sure you get it fixed at some point as quickly as you can.
Thanks for that, Jimmy. Ty, anything you want to add going away?
Well, you guys certainly hit the important points. What I would add, I guess, is for those of you who are not equipped right now, certainly if you are not equipped and you are flying into ADSB airspace, get equipped as soon as you can, because you are flying illegally. Second, for those of you who never touch ADSB airspace and are not equipped, consider equipping. There are so many safety features associated with this ADSB that it will only benefit the whole aviation system as a whole if you equip as well. So those would be my 2 points.
Excellent. Now you bring up a great point, Ty, when you talk about the whole see and be seen aspect of ADSB. The signal that you're putting out is important so that folks can see you, but the information that's coming back into the aircraft, whether it's the traffic information or any of the flight information with weather, next rad, things of that nature, just really makes you a more well-informed operator and just adds to your situational awareness exponentially. So you bring up a great point. With that said, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this session. Ty, Jim Kenny, and Jimmy Wright, I definitely want to thank you guys for your expertise as ADSB team members and helping educate folks on not only the paper report, but everything else having to do with ADSB. I appreciate your time. So with that, I want to thank our attendees for joining us today, and we do hope that this session will help you in the future to be able to check and make sure that your ADSB equipment is working properly. If you do need information, additional information on ADSB, or if you have any further questions that pop up in the future, I mentioned the Equip ADSB website before. I'll say it one more time, and that's www.faa.gov/go/equip ADSB. I said it before, but I can't say it enough that it is a plethora of information included on this website to make you a more educated operator as it relates to ADSB. Do please note, as Ty mentioned before, as it relates to call sign mismatch, that we are going to host one more virtual seminar Thursday, August 5th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time to discuss ADSB call sign mismatch. Jim Kenny, who is here with us today, is the FAA's call sign mismatch expert, and he'll be here to explain what call sign mismatch is, why it matters, and most importantly, how to avoid it. We hope to see you there. Thanks for your time and have a good day.